Good evening and welcome to episode 280 of the Gersnet Podcast. 280, that sounds like an awful lot of episodes, doesn't it? Well, we've got a lot to talk about and tonight will be no different. Gersnet, of course, is the independent Rangers podcast made by fans for fans. That's good when you're stumbling over your second line. And where the content is always free. Now, of course, as we say every week, it's not just a podcast. There is the website with the forum, articles, social media, a great history archive on there. And before I get to introduce the rest of the guests tonight, some of whom are familiar, some of whom you perhaps don't know quite as well, could I ask you to promote this pod if you enjoy it? And if you don't enjoy it, then just leave nasty comments in the YouTube feed like you normally do. We would be disappointed if you didn't do that. So just before I introduce my guest, let me have a quick chat about our sponsors. Forrest Precision Engineering. You've maybe seen their advertising around the stadium. They're a subcontract Glasgow-based engineering company, and we're delighted that they're sponsoring Gersnet Podcast again this year. They've been a big commercial sponsor of Rangers for a number of years, and we really couldn't do this without their help. As I say whenever I'm on, if you are in need of precision engineering, and not all of us are, but if you are, then Forrest Precision Engineering are where you should go. If precision engineering is not something that you do need, then you may also be interested in the Forrest Precision Engineering Executive Lounge, which is a wonderful hospitality area in the main stand at Ibrox. And it's something that maybe if you've somebody with a big birthday coming up or some sort of celebration coming up, and you just want to treat yourselves, you should look into. The way to find out about it is to email the club at hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Okay, let's get on with the rest of the show. I'm joined tonight by a familiar face and perhaps a less familiar face than normal. During the close season, Gersnet we had to get rid of some of the older faces who, let's face it, just probably weren't quite able to do it week after week after week anymore. We've brought in some vitality, some young blood. I'm obviously talking about you just now, Stuart. No, I'm not. I'm talking about Robert Fawcett. Nice to meet you, Robert. This is literally the first time you and I have met. And we're doing it live, so what could possibly go wrong? In 45 minutes time, you're going to realise, boy, I really don't like that guy, do I? That's why they didn't introduce us beforehand. Robert, first question, of course. Is it Robert? Is it Bob? Is it Rab? What's your preferred name?
Rob is fine. I've been called all of the above, but given it's Sunday, I think Robert probably is apt. Otherwise, Stuart might give me a telling off. So.
Well, none of us want a telling off from Stuart tonight. Yeah. Stuart, you're an old hand here, Stuart. You're familiar with the ways of things. Initially, it looked like it was just going to be me and you tonight. Robert's actually a kind of late call-in off the bench, and it's very good of Robert to do that. It's good to know that someone else without a social life on a Sunday is available to come in, and that enthusiasm he'll bring to this show will hopefully cloud over the cantankerousness that you and I will bring. I always think of you and I as the kind of Frank Skerritt and Mr. Abbey of Gersnet. There's one for the TikTok generation.
The party's over.
So anyway, it's good to see you.
Just to show you, there you are, okay? Those are my precision engineering papers.
Did you serve your time?
Oh yes, yeah. A suspended sentence. It was. I did. Yeah. Was it 3 years, 10 months, and 7 days of it? Yeah.
Not anyone's counting, of course.
I was. It was a good idea. I categorised it as a good idea at the time. It was a very good idea at the time, and to be absolutely honest, if it wasn't for two of my favourite people in the world. Namely
Mr. White, Mr. Mackay.
No, actually, Mrs. Thatcher and Mr. Scargill. I'd probably still be doing that, but they had different ideas. So anything I've done since was thanks to them. Anyway, we continue. No, I'm very well, and I did. I was on with Robert last week and called him Robert, so he's getting Robert again. Before he goes any further. And I was actually quite worried when it was only you and I joined. It would have looked a bit like an ancient speed dating service that somebody tuned into. So I'm glad Robert joined us.
As I think everybody is probably glad that that's not the night we had ahead of ourselves. Listen, I've had a busy day, and it's been a busy weekend. Today I did the Beats and Walk, which is a kind of charity thing in Glasgow, which you may or may not be familiar with. So 8 miles under the belt on that. And then I went to see the Banksy exhibition, which is excellent. And unfortunately, you've got one more day to see it if you're interested, and it closes. So that was excellent. 2 excellent things. And yet, neither of those 2 things were the highlight of the weekend. The highlight of the weekend last night. I don't know if you two are interested in this. Last night, the Proms, BBC Two, the Proms did Northern Soul last night, which was just a sensational programme. And even that was only the second best thing on TV at the weekend. So let's talk about the best thing on TV at the weekend, which was, of course, Rangers heading up to Dingwall to play the might of Ross County. Now, Ross County actually have had a slightly better start to the season than the end. Of course, we're in the playoffs last season and quite dramatically stayed in the top flight against Partick Thistle. So, I think we probably all went into this match with a touch of trepidation. It's after a European midweek. After a big European midweek, there's often a dip at the weekend. Look at the Hearts result today. I was going to say look at the Hibs result, but the Hibs result that came as a surprise to nobody. But look at the Hearts result today. You realise that European match. We've seen this many times. It can be a slippery game the following Saturday, no matter who we're against. So it was really quite pleasing that arguably that was our best performance of the season, certainly in the first half. Robert, you're my new guest. Let me start with you. Looking at that starting lineup yesterday, did it surprise you? Did that come as a surprise to you following what happened through the week?
I think the only surprise was really Roof starting. To be honest, I think that was one. I thought he'd get some minutes off the bench. But no, I mean, apart from that, I maybe would have rested Campbell just because of the importance of the game coming up against PSV, and he's usually so important to us as a team. And in actual fact, that game at the weekend was probably the worst he's played in the Rangers jersey, and we still won and we still created chances. So I think from a team selection point of view, expected a couple of changes, didn't expect Roof to come in. But again, I think that's the thing that we've got to get used to now is that we've actually got a strong squad. Even look at the bench yesterday against Ross County, it was fairly strong from that point of view. So it's good to have those options where we can make changes going throughout the season.
Absolutely. Cifuentes on the bench, Jack on the bench, both being rested, you think, or were they dropped, or was it a surprise to see at least not one of them in the starting lineup?
Certainly not Jack. I thought he would have got rested. Cifuentes maybe, just because I felt certainly against PSV, it wasn't his best performance since he's come in. But again, fairly young boy. It's probably the highest quality opposition that he's faced in his career, apart from maybe international football. But no, I mean, I think Jack and Cifuentes might come back into the starting lineup and probably needed that little bit of a rest. We've got to remember with Cifuentes as well, he's effectively had a full season already. He's only had a couple of weeks break, so you don't know how much more he's got left in those legs before it's going to become a bit of an issue over here.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting point. This is his kind of, to see him through to April, May of next season, it would be he'll need a winter break. But we'll worry about that when that happens. Colin, I'm going to call you Colin there at force of habit. Stewart, Kamar Roof.
I'm offended.
You should be. That's why I'm here. Kamar Roof, as Robert mentioned there, a surprise in the starting lineup. But what turned out to be a very pleasant surprise. And the reason I mentioned Colin was because Colin and I used to say this last year, that the best striker at the club was Kamar Roof. He just could never get fit. And I would probably go a step further, that a fit Kamar Roof is arguably the best striker in our league. So it was from a personal point of view, it was a very pleasant to see him back in the starting lineup. And obviously he scored the goal. And a nice goal as well, a nice finish kind of out of nothing. It was a fairly significant contribution. It changed the flow of the game at that point. With Danilo, Dessers, Lammers, Sima, Matondo, now Lawrence is back. We've got Cantwell. I mean, Scott Wright's still with the club. We've really got quite a bit of choice in those attacking areas. Roof showed that when he's fit, he's arguably our best forward. So how do you think we're going to use him this season? How much of Roof do you expect to see?
1 in 4 games.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when he signed for Rangers, both a guy I knew in Belgium and a guy who's a Leeds fan, the two of them said the exact same thing. He'll only play 1 in every 4 games. Was I surprised to see him in the first team yesterday? Yes, because I'd actually forgotten he was still there. And it was, I know you could say, yeah, he's arguably, but I would put up a hell of an argument to say there is no basis for actually saying that he is the best striker in the Rangers lineup or squad.
Who's the better striker than him just now?
Anybody who's fit. I don't know if you've noticed, but you can't play with 10 men. And
Liverpool proved differently today, but I take the point you're making.
I think Liverpool, but you don't go into Liverpool, or I'll bring up last season in the Champions League and what Liverpool did to Rangers. I think you have to be fit to play, and it's okay saying if he'd been fit here or he'd done this. I agree with you, John. Actually, I'm being kind of somewhat flippant. When he is fit, he is actually an outstanding player. We saw that in European competition. We've seen it domestically. I think the frustration from my part is you don't see it often enough. Yeah. And if someone can come to me, a journalist in Belgium can say that to me, and a guy who's a fan of Leeds United can say the same thing to me, and then both of them are proved to be right. Why did you sign somebody who can only play 1 in every 4 games and miss so much of the last 2 seasons? It's quite incredible, to be honest. So am I glad to see him back? Yes. Am I surprised to see him back? Not really, because I think there's an element of desperation for Rangers to find somebody who would be a regular goal scorer and score goals when it's least expected. But I think, to come back to a point that one of the points that Robert covered, I think right at this time in the season, resting players because they've got a European tie, there are 2 schools of thought. One, you rest players because you've got a European tie, you want to keep them safe and fresh. The other is you're still trying to get a team that's actually trying to blend and trying to gel. So you lose 90 minutes where you might strike upon something that would help you in a bigger context. So I'm never convinced that actually resting players is such a great idea, especially when you're actually still trying to find your feet.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and I think I agree with Robert. I think Jack was rested because I don't think Jack can play 2 games a week, and I think he was always going to be rested. Cifuentes, I was a little surprised. He may have a knock. It may be, as Robert suggested, that he just had such a hard game, and it was a hard game for the midfield. They were doing a lot of run. It was decided to change. And to be fair, Lundstrom came in, and my heart sunk a little bit when I saw Lundstrom in the starting lineup. But he actually had a pretty decent game. You couldn't really hold Lundstrom. Responsible for anything yesterday. I thought Lundstrom actually played pretty well. Staying up front, Robert, Dessers started again. Danilo on the bench, Sima on the bench. It seems like he is our preferred number 9, which is the modern way of saying he's our kind of main striker. It seems to be that seems to be how this is panning out. None of us, at least I didn't know a huge amount about him before we bought him. And having seen him pre-season a couple of times, I wasn't massively impressed, but he has improved. There's no doubt he has improved. His pass for the Matondo goal against PSV was a thing of beauty. So there's clearly a footballer in there. I think we all know that. He had a few chances yesterday. The kind of one header in particular, he really should have done better with. What's your impression of Dessers now? We've had a few competitive games now. What's your impression of Dessers? And I say this to you, and I don't know, you probably won't remember this, but I say this to you as somebody who was following Rangers fairly closely when Mark Hateley signed and had written him off as a big coup after about 2 months. And turned out he wasn't. So, you learn from your mistakes over time. But, do you think he is a Nigerian prince, or do you think he's somebody who's looking for a bank account that he's got some money to deposit into? Could you help him out for that? Which one do you think he's going to end up being?
That's the strangest analogy I've heard.
There are worse ones to come, Stuart, don't worry.
I'll tune out then.
Along with everybody else who's listening.
I've still got faith in him, to be honest. I think it would be slightly different if he wasn't getting into the right positions to score. And game after game, he is still putting himself in there. I think if we're continually saying this, like another 10 games down the line and he hasn't scored many more than he has just now, then absolutely we're going to have a problem. But in the games that he's been involved in, I think like the whole team, you've seen gradual improvement game on game.
Yeah.
Now, by his own admission, I think he missed 3 months at the back end of last season. He was a bit behind in pre-season. I think you're now starting to see, him getting up to speed and being fit, getting fitter amongst the rest of the players. And he scored a couple and he's assisted 3 so far. Now, not great numbers, but it's still a contribution. I think the one thing that's made me confident, not just about the lack of goals, it's about the goals that have been spread across the team. I think at this point in the season we're sitting with 8 people that have stuck numbers up in the score sheet. Compare that to last season, where we probably maybe had 2 or 3 players that were scoring goals.
Yeah.
But I think that's a sign of strong Rangers teams of yesteryear, where goals have been spread amongst the team, and other players have picked up the slack for strikers when they haven't hit the back of the net. Now, his performance against PSV showed the kind of running that he can do. I think it is just going to take a little bit of time for him to kind of start hitting the net on a regular basis. But if he's continually putting himself in the right positions, then sooner or later his luck's got to change a little bit. Now, that doesn't hide the fact there was a couple of headers that he probably could have done a little bit better with at the weekend. But I think it's a case of persevering at the moment and still remembering that they're really only 5-6 games into the Rangers careers here.
Yeah.
We've got
it's
to give
still
them.
August.
Exactly.
Do we write him off now, or we give him one more game? Yeah. Typical Rangers supporters. Yeah. He's like you say there. I think you've seen improvement, and the link-up play at times against PSV, but actually yesterday, Ross County and PSV are obviously two very different levels. But the link-up play, particularly in the first half yesterday, was very, very good at times. They really did look like they were starting to find each other, and I guess ultimately that's the goals will come. I think we all feel that the goals will come. That what he has to do is keep getting into the positions. You made a good point there about the fact the goals are being spread around the team, and none more so than James Tavernier, who scored arguably goal of the season already yesterday, Stuart. A goal of real quality. Now, there's been a bit of criticism of Tav by some people in the support.
Name names.
Have a look at the Gersnet. Go on and have a look at the Gersnet forum, and you'll see for yourself. So there's been some criticism of Tav. I think we would all say that he didn't have the best season last year. Now, he didn't. None of them did. He didn't have his best season last year. There are still times when his defending could be improved. But when you've got a right back who can score goals like that one yesterday, it's not really any surprise that he's the first name on our team sheet. I also think that defending's done by a team, and the team last season wasn't playing particularly well. And as such, defenders then get put under pressure. So if our midfield, which certainly looks like a better midfield than it did 12 months ago, and if our attack can just click, do you think that we're in for another vintage Tav season, or do you think that the negatives that we've seen and heard are there? What kind of Tav are you expecting over the next 12 months?
Can I just say you sort of contradicted yourself ever so slightly
I'm surprised it was just slightly.
By saying that the goals are spread throughout the team, and then pointed to Tavernier, who appears to score all the goals every week, and thereby lies the kind of juxtaposition, and I think that's part of the whole complexity of Tavernier as a player. He has been invaluable as a contributor to Rangers and the goals that he's made and the goals he's scored, but has frustrated the hell out of people simply because he is one of the worst defenders I have seen. And I've seen a few. I know defences are collective, but a defence is only as good as its weakest part, and too often the fullbacks at Rangers have sort of proven to be rather weak. Getting back to the point you were making about who was scoring goals up front, you were right about Hateley, but then again, once you found out how unfit Hateley had actually been when he actually signed for Rangers, you understood why he suddenly came on to look like a world-class striker after about 2 months. We're still waiting for Mark Falco and Colin West and one or two others to show the same.
Neil Wood, yeah.
But the point I'll make about the Hateley comparison is, Hateley was one of two strikers, and I think the way that Rangers play, the onus is put so heavily on one guy doing it. The reason the goals are shared throughout the team is because of the formation that you play, and other people have got to join in as attackers, whereas traditionally Rangers played with two strikers, so you always had that, McCoist and Hateley, or Miller and Brand, or Johnson and Smith, whoever it might be. There was always two of them, and because Rangers play with one striker, they have never signed anybody called like Gabriel Batistuta or John Carew, who could play that role day in, day out on their own and score goals. And I think I've always said, and I had this argument once upon a time with Alex McLeish, who pointed to just how well Valencia were doing when they had John Carew up front and Aymar playing behind him. And I pointed out that he was trying to do the same. I think it was with Daniel Purzo and Thomas Buffel. There's it's a bit like trying to do the Paris-Dakar rally in a taxi. You'll start it up and it'll go in the right direction if you point it that way, but the end result might not be what you're looking for. And I think ultimately the Rangers strikers currently, there's a hell of a lot being asked of them if you're the sole striker, to score goals, be the link man, hold the ball up, and hope that people join in with you. And I think last season and one or two seasons previously, I think they lack guys joining in the attack. So it made the striker look isolated. Somebody just commented there, nobody plays with two strikers. Actually, if you look at the way teams play, some teams play with three strikers currently. Don't kid yourself on that the wide guys are not strikers. They are out-and-out strikers. That's where the goals come from. If you look at any number of English teams and look at where the goals come from, it's a forward line of three guys they've got. Because you don't just think because somebody wears a number 9 shirt, they're your primary striker. You get two wide guys come in and are strikers as well. So I think the way that Rangers sometimes approach the game means there's a hell of a lot of onus on the front guy. Rewinding to Tavernier, it's just the same frustrating James Tavernier as he's been in all these days at Ibrox. He will score goals, he will contribute, he will be a great captain on that front, and then somebody, you basically throw your arms up in despair and say, what is he actually doing there? And I think that's just the makeup of the guy. And if you're not used to it now, you'll never get used to it, because I don't really see him changing.
Yeah. I mean, oddly, I don't disagree with you on Tava. I do like Tava. I thought some of the criticism he had was unfair. But, I think a fit Tav and a Tav with a proper midfield in front of him is will be an enormous asset to Rangers this season.
But the other thing, John, is Tav your go-to man, and the reason your go-to man is that a season ago Rangers decided to cash in another guy who would have challenged them for that position and take 11 million quid or whatever it was, 12 million quid from Everton. So you can't have it both ways. You can't cash in the players that would challenge somebody you see primarily as a weakness in the team, and then think that you've got an instant replacement. Rangers had an instant replacement and decided to sell them.
No, indeed. To be fair, I don't know. I don't. The sale of Nathan Patterson looks a smarter move with every passing month. It has to be said. But I don't know if he's ready to have.
When he becomes the championship player in a matter of about 7 months or whatever it is, I think it's time for him to come back.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would buy him back for a couple of million. Just very quickly, divert slightly, and your fan who was saying about playing two strikers. I mean, Roof was playing as a striker yesterday. Roof's not a wide player. Roof is a player who can move about. He has great mobility. He can link up. He can come deep. But Roof is a striker. We played with two strikers yesterday in a three, and not in the style of a Haitley McCoy. It's not in the style of an old 4-4-2. But we definitely had two strikers playing yesterday. Two people who you could only, you would describe them. And Simi is a slightly different type of player. Lammers is a slightly different type of player. They're not out and out strikers, but Roof and Dessers are forwards. There's no getting away from that.
I still think there's a combination to be had with the players that are at Ibrox currently. I still think there's a partnership or a combination of players who might think that Roof might be a support player. He actually might turn into the most significant player if you can keep him fit. That actually is it Rangers, and everybody else then has to join in around him. Yeah. So I still think, and Robert said it earlier on, we are still only 6 games into the season, and talk about finding your feet. It's you have to find your feet really, really quickly just now. Because not only have you had to hit the ground running, you're literally taking on Usain Bolt over 100 yards to try and keep yourself alive. Robert,
Ross County, they missed a glorious chance at the start of the second half yesterday, and probably had 2 or 3 other chances, particularly in the second half, where 12 months ago. They may have scored both of them against us. Thankfully, this time they didn't. It was a game of two halves in some ways. The first half, I thought we were probably the best we've been this season. Second half, we definitely fell off it a bit. We weren't as convincing in the second half. We weren't as fluid. Ross County improved. I don't know if was a tactical change on their half, but a thing that struck me was that it's been a long time since we've seen a good 90 minutes from Rangers. The Celtic game towards the end of last season at Ibrox was a good 90 minutes, but beyond that, under Beale, it's kind of felt like poor first half, a rollicking at half time, a good second half, or a good first half, and then I don't know, they doesn't talk to them at all at half time, and then they come out and say, it's not very good. It's a slight concern for me. Do you have any idea why this is happening? Is this a fitness thing? Is this just the players getting used to each other? Is this is it a tactical thing? Why do we seem unable to get a full 90 minutes out of this team?
It is bizarre. I think I'd much prefer it to happen like it did at the weekend, where we're 2 goals up at half time and then we taper off and don't concede in the second half. That'd make it much easier than the old Heartland than going the other way, where we're put under pressure in the first half and lose a goal and then have to fight back. It is quite bizarre. I think on one hand, the games where we have gone in behind or we've had to fight back, at least it shows resilience and character. But there really is no excuse for dropping off. It either comes from complacency on the players' part, or like you say, it's maybe a lack of urgency from the management team. But it's really difficult to understand why, when you're comfortably up 2-0, goal difference could be such an important thing towards the back end of the season. It's the continuing to push to try and take advantage of that when you've got the momentum. It's almost like we take a couple of goals we take the lead and we're happy just to let the game go out. Where other teams in the past have been, right, we've got our foot on their throat. Let's not take it off. Let's continue to push forward that advantage and score as many goals as we can. I think after the break, if it continues to be that way, then I'll start to get a little bit more worried, because there's only going to be so many times that you can kind of run your luck, like the chance that White had. 9 times out of 10 he would nestle that in the top corner from a header point of view, and then it puts us immediately back under pressure because it's only 2-1. So I think we got away with it from that chances point of view. But apart from that, we were comfortable during the rest of the game, and then there was a couple of tweaks later on with Matondo and Sima coming in, which injected a bit more pace for us, and stretched Ross County a little bit more, and we created a couple of cracking chances towards the end of the game that probably should have ended up in the back of the net again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just something that it's frustrating, because you said yourself there, we should be killing teams off and we're not yet. And teams like Ross County can be dangerous away from home if you give them a hint of coming back into the game. And it is frustrating. I know it's doing it. Stuart, you've got unlike me, I don't know, maybe Robert actually does. Say that sentence again. Unlike me, who have never really spent any time around professional football players, you have a bit more of an insight into how professional football players think. Celtic dropped points at home on Saturday, and I think that came as a surprise to most of us. St Johnstone are having a terrible season. Probably favourites to go down based on pre-season and the start of the season. So for Celtic to drop 2 points to them at home came as a big shock. Last season and the season before, Celtic always seemed to find the late goal. I used to hate it when you would hear they were drawing and you would have a look and 2 minutes to go, and you'd look again and it's the 3rd minute injury time and they would score, and it just seemed to happen in every game. They always seem to find that late goal. That's them lost and drawn their last 2 matches, both away. One away and one at home, both to Kilmarnock and St Johnstone, teams you would not expect them to drop points to. Psychologically, how does that affect our players? Does it affect them at all? Does it give them a boost? Do they close it out? Do players not notice these things? Do they just ignore it? And in the end, is it just all about what we do? Is it what we focus on? How do you think that will have affected the dressing room at Ibrox?
I think if you're looking at the opposition and thinking they could do us a favour by dropping points, then your mindset and your mentality is wrong. You've got to do it for yourself and put the pressure on. You couldn't say that Celtic failed on Saturday to beat St Johnstone because of the pressure that Rangers applied to them by beating Ross County. I don't think it works that way. Getting back to the Ross County game, very, very simple for me. Ross County is the kind of opponent where a lot of those players wouldn't know where Dingwall was, and probably still looking for Ross County in the map, never mind Dingwall. You want to go in there, win the game, take 3 points. Doesn't matter how you win the game and take the 3 points. It's a bit like cup tie football. Don't come out with any red cards and don't pick up any silly injuries. So therefore it was job done, and you take that and you go into your next match. I think if Rangers take anything from it, it has to be from their own performance rather than results anywhere else, because you know that unless you actually do the job yourself, the next time you play your nearest and dearest rivals, they can still beat you. They're not going to beat themselves that day. You still have to physically beat them. And I think that side of it is more about you concentrating on your own job. It's the Bill Belichick in terms of American football, very simple mantra: do your job. Don't worry about anybody else. Do your job. And if you do it to the best of your ability, there's a chance you'll win. And I think Rangers did do it. Your frustration is right, John. Name 90 minutes that Rangers have played and looked good. I think you're getting back to maybe the European run from about 2 seasons ago. They seem to play in periods and quarters. They seem to divvy the game up as to when they're going to give 100% and when they're going to basically take their foot off the throttle. hugely frustrating. But you have to think that somebody's given them that kind of directive of get yourself in front and then maybe hold on. No, I don't think you're good enough to be able to do that. So you might as well go for broke. If you're 2-0 up, you might as well try and make it 3 and 4 and 5. And that is what Celtic do. You can't be surprised that Celtic score as many goals because they have, over a number of seasons, played for 90 minutes and aim to win over 90 minutes and score goals over 90 minutes. Where I do think the mindset at Ibrox has been get yourself a couple of goals in front and just hold on.
Interesting. I mentioned the Celtic result because obviously we're playing them in the weekend, and that was wondering if it would affect the players. I've read, and I say this to you because you do have some insight into this. I've read numerous of times or I've heard it said by players and managers, what we don't see what's in the media. We just ignore what's in the media. And then,
until you turn up at a press conference, somebody grabs you by the throat.
I was going to say, and then of course you realise that that's absolute garbage. They absolutely, the rest of us, they can't help it. Of course they read these things. And that's why I was wondering if you thought this had any, the Rangers team would have been on the bus home. They couldn't have been too far from Glasgow by the time they got the Celtic result come through. It must give them something. What do you think, Robert? Do you think it gives them a wee boost, or do you think that doesn't make any difference? They're just so focused on their own job. All they're thinking about is PSV. Doesn't make any difference what the Celtic score was.
Well, if you check out Todd Cantwell's Instagram, you can definitely see that they know what's happening with results when he's posting his cheeky little smiles, which I love, by the way, because I think it's about time we had a player that kind of treated them with a little bit of contempt. But no, I think there will be an element of a little boost, but like Stuart says, the teams that I remember from yesteryear under Smith, Advocat, we focused on what we needed to do. It didn't matter a jot what happened across the road when it came to the league and when it came to winning football games. We went out with the sole purpose in mind of beating the team that was in front of us. And I think that's the mindset that you really need to be approaching these games with, because if you focus too much on what your opposition are doing or what your nearest rivals are going to be doing, you take your eye off the ball, and it potentially allows a bit of complacency to then drift into the team. Again, the 55 season, we continually pushed and pushed and pushed, regardless of how many points they dropped. And I think that demonstrates the mindset that you need in your team. Is that you go into every single game with the expectation that you're going to win, and that you're going to win by a couple of goals. Because that's ultimately what we should be doing. And I think that's the mindset that some of these players need to have. It's great to laugh at them if there's a slip up, but equally that means nothing if we don't beat them in the third, and if we don't continue to beat what's in front of us after that. That's only half the job done at that point.
Absolutely. Right. Let me change the subject very quickly. We've talked about, important games coming up, important games we've just played. Arguably, the most important thing that happened last week at Rangers didn't happen on the pitch. There was 2 announcements about off the pitch at Rangers. Firstly, James Taylor, and because time is against us, I won't make he's seen fire and rain and he should come to us at any problems like that. I won't make any of those puns in this one. James Taylor was appointed as our Chief Financial Officer. Let me say at the very beginning, I am not some kind of finance expert. I wouldn't even claim to be an expert in business. I had never heard of James Taylor before this, at least certainly not this one. A cursory glance at his CV suggests this is somebody who is eminently qualified to carry out this job at Rangers. Certainly somebody we've been needing since the boardroom changes and management C-suite changes that we saw earlier on this year, that was the end of last season. So it's quite good that role has been filled, and we wish him every success and hope that's a great appointment. Probably more interestingly, though, was the announcement that a gentleman called John Halstead has been given a seat on our board, become one of the directors of Rangers. Now, Again, I don't know John Halstead. I've never met John Halstead. I know nothing about John Halstead other than what I've read. From what I can see, he is an American with no obvious emotional connection to Rangers that I can see. I could be dead wrong there. It may turn out that, his father used to run the Bridgeton Loyal. But from what I can see, he doesn't have an emotional connection to Rangers. He has been a very, very successful businessman running equity funds. I'm not entirely sure what equity funds are, but he's been running them and he's been doing well at it. I guess my question to both of you is, what do you think he's doing on our board? Why do you think he's on the board of Rangers Football Club? Robert, what do you think?
So I think usually with these types of moves, it's because that there's investment linked to it. And I think that that's probably the sign that either he has invested monies in the club before now, or that there's potential investment coming down the pipe.
So you think he's seen Desser's first 3 or 4 matches and thought, hang on, is this where they're spending my money? I'm on this board.
I don't think it's that. I mean, you never really know what's going on in the boardroom. There's been talk of investment coming in for quite a while now with the rumours that you hear in the WhatsApp stuff. But whether this is a sign of things coming down the pipe or not, we'll never know. I think initially when it got announced, it was people were running around, with their hands in the air because we've got a billionaire on the board now. But what that's going to mean in the short term for us, none of us really know. It could well be that he's looking at how he can maximise investment in Rangers to make it a stronger commercial proposition moving forward. But we're all guessing. Nobody really knows. And again, I'm not going to profess to be a financial expert. What I will say is, typically, if you get appointed to the board, that is because it's the outcome that you've asked for in return for something else, isn't it? So what that is, I've got no idea.
Stuart, you've got your nose to the ground. You know about things. Any light you can shine on this?
No, actually, I think Robert probably summarised that pretty well. If you appear on the board of directors of a football club or any business, it's because you have a vested interest in that. And I think many Rangers fans will be hoping that he's already in place for a tranche of money to come in Rangers' direction. This whole thing about him, he's a billionaire and all the rest of it. You don't become a billionaire investing in football.
Yeah, you're a millionaire. Start off as a billionaire and then invest in a football club. Is that?
Yeah. You're pretty much bang on there, John. The amount of investment, I would say, this might be very harsh indeed. I do not see any angle currently as to why extremely rich Americans, unlike England, where you can buy your way into top clubs or facilitate the improvement of a club that would get you into the top tier, as has happened, or you might see happening with, like, say, Birmingham City just now. There is not that potential.
No obvious return, no, I agree.
No, especially in Scotland. In Scotland, there is none. I mean, it was highlighted several times over this week when you looked at Aston Villa beating Hibs and what Aston Villa have spent and what their income has been compared to what Hibs have spent and what their income is. So there's nobody joining up with Rangers to try and make 500 million out of Rangers in the next 5 years. That ain't going to happen.
No,
yeah.
No, I agree.
The only other angle could be that he's the man that's funding the move for Eden Hazard. And we'll see him before deadline day, so that'll be good.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I think there's more chance of Mickey Hazard that used to play with Spurs.
I'm just purely facetious there. That's not going to happen.
Calm yourself.
Talking about things that have happened in the past, because we've had some interesting deadline days, but talking about things that have happened in the past. PSV Eindhoven again coming up. Looking forward to the weekend. I won't spend too much time on this, but as I wrote here in my notes, it's deja vu all over again. A 2-2 draw at home, which means we go over to Eindhoven as underdogs. I think. I don't think it's unfair to say that. It's not, we're not massive underdogs, but, I think you would always say the home team have an advantage. I think we saw enough from Eindhoven to suggest to us that they're a pretty decent team. If we didn't know that beforehand, they're a pretty decent team. They're a bit different from last season, but then so are we. A bit different from last season as well. So we're in the exact same position as last year. Both teams going into the game at the Phillips Stadium, I think it's still called, at the Phillips Stadium. Who do you see lining up for us in this game, Stuart? Who do you think the important players are going to be?
I can't see it being that different from last week. I think that was the strongest team that Rangers could put out last week, and it's going to take your strongest team to beat PSV. You have to beat PSV. There's no point in getting in there and saying, let's keep it tight and see if we can get a draw out of this and take it to penalties or whatever it is. You need to win this tie in 90 minutes. So you have to go with all your trump cards, so to speak. So I think he's not the kind of guy that fills me with confidence. He's not a Walter Smith.
Beale.
Yeah. He's not a Walter Smith who would fill you with confidence because of his pragmatism, because he knew he would have drilled the team to an inch of its life, but they would know what they were going to do. He's not the kind of guy. He's not a Dick Advocaat who would go out and pick the best team to score more goals than the opposition. He's not that kind of guy either. So I do wonder sometimes, but they have to win it in 90 minutes, so it'll be the strongest possible team. And just what you mentioned there, the reason I was chuckling, incessantly to myself there and even switched the microphone off, so kind of a really good laugh, was that your comment about we've had some weird and wonderful arrivals in the last day. Exhibit A, Filippo Maniero, who arrived on the final day to great celebrations that Rangers had signed a Serie A striker and disappeared back out the door without anybody actually knowing what the guy even looked like.
Yes. Well, let's hope it's not like that. It's from having watched the first leg. There were times when PSV were controlling the match, when there were times when they were knocking the ball around a little easily. They were doubling up against the fullbacks. I think the second half, obviously, I didn't see the game. I had the misfortune of driving from the middle of Banff back to Glasgow last Tuesday night. So I had the pleasure of the Rangers game via Radio Scotland, which was interesting, I have to say. I've never heard us lose two each before. But there you go. It seemed to be what we did. I'm interested that you think it will just be. It's going to be the same. You think we go? That's the strongest team. That's where we have to go. What about yourself, Robert? Do you think it will be the same team? Do you think we're going? Is that the strongest team we've got? Do you think it'll change things around?
I think that is the strongest team we've got, but I think he might end up changing it around a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see Lundstrom and Jack line up against PSV over there, because it'll allow one of them to drop a little bit deeper.
And who goes out? Who leaves the team? Cifuentes, Raskin? Do you see those?
I don't. If you're going to sacrifice one of them, it'd be Cifuentes. I think at the moment, just because of the struggles that he had against them on the first leg. Now, that's not saying that's an approach that I would adopt, because that to me would suggest that we want them to continually attack us, which I don't think we can afford to do. We've got to have something in our team that offers something going forward. I don't think he'll start both Matondo and Sima. And again, Matondo coming off the bench worked really well against PSV at Ibrox. So you'd probably look at Sima starting and then Matondo coming off the bench again. But I think the one thing that we can't do is we can't get into that mindset of just going there to defend. We've got, as Stuart says, we've got to go over there and win. We can't play for the draw to take it to extra time and penalties.
Sorry. On you go. I had one very, maybe I don't say it was controversial, or it might be interesting, or it might surprise people. I would be more confident of Rangers going to Eindhoven, to the Philips Stadion, and actually getting a result and a victory having seen PSV at Ibrox. I don't know. I think maybe we built this PSV team up to be something extra special, a better team than they had like last season. I know they might have some better players, but I still think that was a very good PSV team last season. I didn't see anything really that made this look like an improvement on what they had last season. So I think beforehand, I would have said it's going to be tough for Rangers. I think having seen PSV and actually some of the weaknesses, they were extremely good going forward. They could string passes together. The speed they played at and the pace they played at was fantastic at times. But Rangers scored twice against them. And if you looked at it all in, there were weaknesses there that a diligent Rangers side could exploit.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
Sorry, no. Interestingly, they didn't play at the weekend. The Dutch FA gave PSV the weekend off.
What a novel! Imagine supporting your clubs. It'll never catch on.
No, they will not catch on in this country. But I go back to the point that you made earlier, because it is in my head that, this time of the year as well, this time of the season, that actually you maybe need games. Maybe you're fine because it's a new PSV team. Maybe you do need games to get used to each other and kind of keep things going. Anyway, we'll see. Look, last question on this. We're not far away from finishing, but last question on this one. Robert, whatever happens, we're playing in Europe. Okay, we're playing in Europe, for the rest of the autumn, through into whether it's the Champions League or the Europa League. At this stage now, having seen the first leg, knowing what you know about the Champions League from last year, how would you feel if it was the Europa League? Would that be a disappointment for you at this stage?
So if you'd asked me that before the season started, because of the wonderful reporting in the Scottish media around the Club World Cup, I would have said absolutely drop into Europa League to get more coefficient points. That would be better for us if it meant we could qualify for that. Now that the proper rules of qualification for that tournament have been identified, there's no chance I think that we can qualify for that. So absolutely, we need to be at the top table of football. We're Rangers at the end of the day. We should be in the Champions League. And that is absolutely what we should be striving for, to get through this tie with PSV. It's great that we've got that safety net of Europa League. Absolutely, it's fantastic. At least we're going to have European football until Christmas, but we were one of the founding clubs of the Champions League. If this is going to be the last year in its current format, then we should be at that table as well.
Yeah. Okay. It's the end of the transfer window, the end of this week, or the end of this coming week. Hadji left today on loan, or certainly this weekend, he left on loan off to Spain. Did that disappoint you, Stuart? Were you disappointed to see Hadji disappear for the season?
Yeah, because I think he's actually somebody who can play football. The point Robert made a minute ago there about maybe making changes for PSV and playing Lundstrom in the midfield along with Jack. That for me is almost a kind of defeatist approach before you start. I know you can't afford to lose the game too early, but you have to win this game first. And I think you want to be playing with match winners. And Hadji, for me, is always a potential match winner, regardless of who the opposition is. So I think the fact, two things disappoint me. One, that the Rangers don't think they've got a use for him, therefore he can go. And secondly, that he actually went so willingly. Now, I know as a footballer you want to play games and you want to improve your lot and improve your chances. The fact it's for a whole season makes me think that he ain't coming back.
Yeah, I think this is the short window, don't you, Stuart? I think this is them getting the short window, aye.
And I because I think Rangers have signed maybe one or two players who are much of a muchness in terms of the kind of role that he plays. In fact, we even mentioned a guy earlier in terms of Roof and Hadji. For me are the kind of guys that you could use or utilise in certain positions depending who the opposition is. They're very similar, and if Hadji wants to play football, maybe he should go somewhere else. But I think again, it might be a bit like Hadji Lawrence, Cantwell, Roof, all of these guys for me anyway are kind of intermixed. You can jumble them up and bring them out in any sort of permutation. They could all do a job for you, and I think that it might be a bit of a risk that Hadji's the one that goes out, and I know he was a long-term injury, but there's two players within that quartet that I mentioned there, namely Roof and Lawrence, who we have seen virtually nothing of, and they've had lesser injuries than Hadji has had. So that would maybe fill me with a little bit of dread. But I'd be sorry to see him go, because I've liked him, and I think he's a talented player, but who maybe we never actually saw the best of.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think Cantwell probably is taking his place in the team just now.
Yeah.
Lammers does a little bit of what Hadji does as well. I still can't quite figure out Lammers' best position, but he seems a kind of link guy, a guy who can try and make things happen. I don't know. I'm honest. I'm not as bothered about Hadji leaving. I always felt he flattered to deceive a little bit. But I can understand his desire to play. I can understand, if he gets a chance to go and play in the top league in Spain, I can see why he would say, look, I want to take that. I'm not getting a game just now. I'm not getting in this team. I need to play games. I've lost, 18 months of my career. I need to play games. I can see why he's keen. Last point to yourself, Robert, then. As I said, window closes on Friday. Can we expect many more to leave? Do you see many more? There's been a wee bit of clearing of house this week. So do you see many more leaving, and do you think there's a chance anyone else will come in?
Is Manier already away?
he's just been given a new contract, Stuart. 4 years.
So I think obviously the Kamara one's now moving, so he's going to be out the door, which is a bit of a given. I think a lot of the fans are probably still wanting Davis to move on so that we can sign another good quality centre half. And I think that's probably the one area where I think we are a little bit light. We've got Balogun, who's a capable backup, but I think we're probably still one light in that area. And then if injuries still permit with Ridvan, are we going to be covered at left back? Because let's face it, Borna has purple patches where he plays well, as he has done the last few games, but then he'll go on a 10-game run where he absolutely hides and can't do anything. So it's whether we've got enough cover at that left back spot to give us the balance and cover we need there, and I think that might be a problem. I'd love us to pull something out of the hat, but you never know with these things. I think Bill's usually has got a lot to say in these matters, which can confuse fans a lot when he talks about recruitment and players and people we want to bring in. So I guess it's going to be a case of waiting until that window slams shut, or either just creaks closed with a whimper.
Okay, I don't know if Eden Hazard can play left back. But you never know. You never know.
I saw more of a centre half myself.
Listen, Frankie asked me to keep it to the 50 minutes, and I've gone for an hour and one. So I'll not be presenting again for a while. So let me. As
Alan McCoy might say, that's the closest I've been late in a while.
Let me thank both of you tonight for giving up your Sunday nights and coming along and having to answer my inane questions. It's been lovely to meet you, Robert, and it's always good to speak with Stuart. There's always interesting stuff comes up. I don't know if there's going to be a preview of the PSV match, but I think there probably will. Unless Alec has been abducted by aliens, I would be astonished if he doesn't want to talk about a European tie.
We're flying to Eindhoven. We're flying to Eindhoven on Tuesday morning to do it.
You're doing a live one from the square.
Frankie doesn't know it yet, but he paid for the tickets the other week there.
That's the kind of content we're here for. That's what I like to hear. So I don't know if there'll be a preview of the PSV match, but there might be. There will almost certainly be some post-match reaction. And there's definitely a preview of the Celtic game next Friday night.
Sorry, John. I need to say this. If the Phillips factory had still been in Hamilton, I'd have gone down and done a preview from outside the Phillips factory in Hamilton, just to make it look as if we were actually in Eindhoven.
We're actually there. Yep. Now, there's probably somewhere in Lanarkshire that can pretend it's Holland.
There are windmills everywhere.
There's windmills everywhere, exactly.
In fact, I could take you just down the hill towards Lark Hall. There's the Dutch royal family are well respected down there.
Well respected, yeah. Quite right. Okay, let me finish before I get shouted at. So, as I said, there are probably going to be more podcasts during the week. Check Gersnet on Twitter. Frankie will keep you up to date on that. He'll let you know who's on. It's always good, you know that. Particularly some of the European stuff. It's good stuff. Just a reminder, if you want to listen to this again, or if you want to tell people about us, obviously we can get us on YouTube. You can also get us on Acast, iTunes, Castbox, Stitcher, or indeed Spotify, which is always the one I like because I'm on the same platform as Bruce Springsteen. And there's a sentence I never thought I'd utter. So as well as thanking Robert and Stewart for their time tonight, just a reminder, our thank you to Forrest Precision Engineering for their support. As I said, we could do this without them, so it is very good of them. And lastly, wish you all a very good week. A good week in Rangers. Let's hope it's one to remember. Let's hope it's a season-defining one for the positive. Thanks very much. Good night.